perspective of John Finnis, one of the most influential modern legal philosophers. Finnis is an Australian legal scholar who grew up in Adelaide before receiving a prestigious Rhodes Scholarship that allowed him to study at the University of Oxford. He later became an emeritus professor at Oxford University and has gained international recognition for his work in jurisprudence. In the year 1980, Finnis published the influential book Natural Law and Natural Rights, widely regarded as a seminal modern restatement of natural law theory. Through this work, Finnis revived and reformulated classical natural law ideas for the modern legal and philosophical environment. To illustrate Finnis's contributions, we can use the analogy of a garden. Imagine a village with a garden that feeds and unites the community. Rules are set to take care of it, but over time, people only focus on following the rules, forgetting the garden's purpose. Then there comes a wise gardener like John Finnis and reminds them that rules exist to help the garden thrive. Just as plants need sunlight, water, and care, human beings need life, knowledge, friendship, and reason. Finnis teaches that, among other things, laws like garden rules should nurture these essentials and promote the common good. Let's have an overview of Finnis's contribution to natural law. Finnis's contributions are particularly significant because they helped revive natural law jurisprudence during a period when legal positivism largely dominated legal philosophy. At the time, legal positivism tended to emphasize that law is created by human institutions and authorities, and therefore treated morality as separate from law. Finnis challenged this view by arguing that law cannot be understood without reference to moral reasoning. In doing so, he returned to the ideas of Thomas Aquinas, whom we've looked at before, whose work laid the foundation for classical natural law theory. Nearly 700 years after Aquinas, Finnis attempted to reformulate natural law theory in a modern philosophical framework. And like Aquinas, Finnis believed that law is fundamentally connected to ethical questions about what is good and what is bad for human beings. According to Finnis, legal theory must be grounded in moral philosophy because laws exist to guide human behavior toward the common good. Therefore, one cannot properly understand what law is unless one first understands its purpose. The central aim of natural law theory, according to Finnis, is to determine what is genuinely good for the human person and how law can help individuals and societies achieve those goods. Let's look at his definition of natural law. Finnis defines natural law as a set of principles of practical reasonableness in ordering human life and human community. And this definition highlights the connection between moral reasoning and social organization. So for Finnis, natural law principles guide individuals not only in personal moral conduct, but also in political decision-making, in legal interpretation, in civic life. And these principles of natural law can operate in many other areas, including moral philosophy and ethics, political philosophy, jurisprudence, judicial decision-making, and civic participation. He also argues that natural law explains the binding force of positive law, even when those laws cannot be directly deduced from natural law principles. In other words, positive laws, which are created by governments or those in authority, derive their legitimacy from their relationship to deeper moral principles that promote human flourishing and the common good. So let's find out the central question that Finnis addresses in trying to define natural law. So his starting point, like that of Aristotle, is a fundamental philosophical question. What constitutes a worthwhile and valuable human life? And he answers this question by identifying 7 basic goods which he believes are essential for human flourishing. So these goods represent fundamental aspects of human well-being that every human being values and pursues in some form. And he lists them out as life, knowledge, play, aesthetic, experience, sociability, practical reasonableness, and religion. And he argues that these goods are universal, meaning that they apply to all human beings regardless of culture, time period, or social background. So his theory can be structured around 3 major components, which we are going to look at. First, like we've mentioned, the basic goods, which are fundamental values that constitute human flourishing. Then we have principles of practical reasonableness. These are rules that guide rational decision making. Then lastly, we have general moral standards, which are ethical rules derived from applying practical reason to the basic goods. So these elements form the framework through which individuals are able to determine whether actions are morally right or wrong. Our focus today will be on the 7 basic goods and the practical reasonableness, which together form what his theory of natural law is. So back to the 7 basic goods. Finnis describes the basic goods as self-evident, irreducible, and universally valuable. So they do not require proof because any rational person can recognize their value, and they are premoral, meaning that they exist prior to moral judgments. They provide the foundation upon which moral reasoning is built. And most importantly, Finnis argues that the list of basic goods is exhaustive and all other human goods ultimately relate to one or more of these goods. So let's have a quick look at these 7 goods. So first we have life, which basically refers to the fundamental drive for self-preservation and survival. So this includes our physical health, our bodily integrity, freedom from pain, and the continuation of human life through procreation. So protecting life for Finnis stands out as a basic human good. Then knowledge is valued for its own sake. So people naturally desire to understand the world and seek truth rather than remain ignorant. And this includes intellectual inquiry, education, scientific discovery. Third, play. Play involves recreation, enjoyment, and fun. And these include activities that are undertaken purely for enjoyment rather than for practical or instrumental purposes. These include sports and leisure activities. Then fourth, we have aesthetic experience. Aesthetic experience refers to the appreciation of beauty and can include art, music, literature, natural scenery, and these experiences enrich human life and contribute towards our well-being. Then fifth, we have friendship or sociability, and this refers to human relationships and community life. At the most basic level, it involves peaceful social cooperation, and at its highest level, it involves deep friendship and mutual concern for the well-being of others. Acting for the sake of one's friends or in the interest of others reflects this good. Then sixth, which we will revert to in detail, is practical reasonableness. So Finnis refers to practical, or rather defines practical reasonableness as the ability to use reason to guide our own actions and decisions. It involves deciding how to live, choosing between different life goals, and it shapes one's character and conduct. He considers this good particularly important because it allows individuals to intelligently pursue all the other basic goods. Then lastly, the 7th basic good that Finnis stipulates in his theory is religion. And this refers to human concern about ultimate questions of existence and the meaning of life, basically. It includes the reflection on the nature of the universe, the place of the human person, the possibility of a transcendent or divine order, and it basically reflects humanity's desire to understand realities beyond immediate personal interest or that which is physical. So, like we said, his natural law theory comprises of three major components, but today's focus will be mostly on the basic goods and practical reasonableness. So we are going to look at why practical reasonableness is very central to his theory. So after identifying the basic goods, Finnis explains how individuals should make decisions about pursuing them. And this is done through practical reasonableness, which involves rational principles guiding human actions. So these principles originate from the first principle of practical reason, which is good is to be done and pursued, and evil is to be avoided. So that forms the foundation of moral reasoning. Then from this basic idea, Finnis derives a set of 9 other requirements of practical reasonableness, which guide human decision making. So individuals should organize their lives around meaningful long-term goals rather than acting randomly. So basically, we want, he points out to having a coherent plan of life. So that's the first requirement. Then the other requirements are stipulated in the slide. No arbitrary preference among basic goods, that one should not irrationally favor one basic good while completely ignoring the others. Of course, this brings a bit of criticism and doubt because, first of all, we don't know whether the list of basic goods that he stipulates is exhaustive, and why one shouldn't have preference for one thing, let's say life, rather than aesthetic or any other good within that list. Yeah. Then there should be no arbitrary preference among persons. So every person's well-being matters. So when we're exercising our practical reasonableness, we need to consider equality. Then another requirement of practical reasonableness is detachment. Yeah, so to maintain a healthy distance from particular goals so that they remain rational and flexible. Then commitment, people should remain dedicated to worthwhile projects and not abandon them too easily. Then efficiency, one should pursue goals in ways that reasonably achieve the intended good. Then respect for every basic value, one must never intentionally act against a basic good. So the basic goods that we listed when exercising our decision making, that not intentionally acting against a basic good. Yeah. Then promotion of the common good. Yeah, so individuals should support the well-being of their communities. And lastly, following one's conscience. Yeah, so people must act according to their best rational moral judgment. So he stipulates these requirements as necessary when exercising practical reasonableness, and like we mentioned before, practical reasonable is one of the basic goods that he stipulates are as something that is universal and desired and valued by all human persons. Yeah, so basically this is a guide of how to exercise that practical reasonableness, and it's important because it helps us achieve the other goods. And ultimately then he's trying to combine the basic goods and the exercise of this practical reasonableness to explain that that forms now his theory of natural law. And then Finnis also introduces the first principle of morality, which states that individuals should choose only those actions that are compatible with integral human fulfillment. Yeah, like we said, and we're going to clarify again, his main question, he starts from the starting point of what is a valuable life, and therefore that will help us to understand what the purpose of law is. So actions that are not compatible with integral human fulfillment, which refers to the flourishing, yeah, the blooming of both an individual and community, should not be chosen. So unlike basic good, the first principle of morality does not provide direct reasons for action, but instead guides the balancing of reasons when making decisions. Yeah. So his argument can be summarized as that the 7 basic goods combined with the 9 principles of practical reasonables, form the universal and immutable principles of natural law. And these principles guide both moral behavior and the creation, and should also guide the creation of legal systems. Yes, so he believes that when formulating law, or what is the nature of law, law should promote human flourishing and the common good. Yeah, and he suggests that natural law principles have influenced real legal developments. Remember, he's writing in the 1980s. Yeah. And one example, I think we looked at it in one of our episodes regarding the Eichmann case. During the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi officials were prosecuted for crimes against humanity after World War II, many of the acts that were prosecuted were not explicitly illegal under the laws of Nazi Germany at the time that they were committed. However, the tribunal applied a higher standard of justice based on universal moral principles. Yeah, and Finnis then interprets this as evidence that natural law exists beyond positive law, and therefore could be used to justify holding those individuals accountable for fundamentally immoral actions. Then, of course, there's a lot of criticism of his theory, but we can see how much he revived natural law theory, because at the time it had been overshadowed by legal positivism, which we're going to look at in the next series of shapers of legal positivism. I don't know what you're going to call it, but then he was trying to explain that that natural law theory isn't just founded on theological or classical arguments. He was trying to emphasize that there's objectivity about natural law, and therefore that's what led him to formulate these basic goods that are universal, that all human persons are seeking, and then practical reasonableness that we use to seek those goods, and then of course all this aims at having a human person that is flourishing, and a society that is integrally developing and flourishing as well. So of course, some of the criticism first will point to the list of basic goods. Is it exhaustive? Yeah. Are there other goods? Yeah. Of course, there's life, there's aesthetics, there's practical reasonableness, there's friendship. So is it exhaustive? And then of course, the other question after that would be, what is the hierarchy among these goods? Why would I, for example, put a friendship above practical reasonableness, or religion before friendship? Yeah, so he doesn't give a hierarchy, and therefore some of his critics argue that in instances of conflicts, yeah, how is a person, or in developing a law, what takes priority among those basic goods? And then of course, because he's Australian, and then of course he studies in Oxford, the possibility of cultural bias, because then also there's a tendency towards cultural bias on what practical reasonableness is, yeah, because sometimes it's heavily influenced by the cultural systems and the values of a particular society. Yet he still insists and tries to build on what St. Thomas Aquinas had said, that natural law is universal, it's objective and immutable, and ultimately should contribute towards the common good of society and also the good of each person. So we can tell that Finnis's modern natural law theory represents one of the most significant contemporary developments in jurisprudence. Yeah, by identifying the 7 basic goods and the 9 principles of practical reasonableness, Finnis provides a structured framework for understanding how moral reasoning guides human actions and legal systems. So his theory attempts to demonstrate that law cannot be separated from morality, and that the ultimate purpose of law is to promote human flourishing and the common good. And through this approach, he revived and modernized the natural law tradition, first articulated by thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas, showing that natural law remains relevant to modern legal and moral debates. And for me, I think what I consider striking would be his framework can be applied in discussions about ethical and legal questions. Yeah, things like human rights and dignity, and then where we have more complex questions of human rights and I beg your pardon, bioethics and medical law on complex issues, family and social policy, justice and the common good. So you sort of have not necessarily a wholesome or a perfect theory, but you have a sort of structured method for evaluating whether laws support or undermine human flourishing. Yeah? Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, when formulating a law or when thinking of a law, does it support or undermine human flourishing? Does it contribute towards one of the 7 basic goods? Yeah. And his influence has also been major in contemporary legal philosophy, especially in response to thinkers that are associated with legal positivism. So later on, we'll look at H.L. Hart, Joseph Raz. So through these debates, Finnis has helped shape modern discussions about the nature of law, legal authority, and moral obligations. And that brings us to the end of today's episode on natural law theory. And I think from the analogy that we began with, we can look at John Finnis as someone who tries to nurture and helps to, basically to nurture the human person and see him flourish. And therefore, the development and formulation of laws should be seen as a means, as a tool towards that, and guided by universal goods that are desired, that are wanted by almost every human person. And this can be achieved through practical exercise of practical reasonableness. Of course, there are loops. It's not a perfect theory, but it has really contributed to a structured way of thinking about natural law theory and its application. Did you learn something today? Please feel free to share your thoughts on Finnis's natural law for human flourishing using the details that are shared on your screen at the moment. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button for our next episode. See you then.